Hear me okay? Awesome. All right. Great. I'll call the Plan Commission to order at 6:31 p.m. Let's call the roll.
President McCaig,
Here,
Dan Wickland is no.
he's excused.
Yep. Trustee Bockhorst?
Here.
Okay. Josh Pollock, he also is excused. Eric Crow,
I'm here.
Therese Klein,
I'm here.
and Barbara Kylie Miller.
Here.
Great. All right, the first item on our agenda is to approve the minutes. Let's see. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
I'll move to approve.
I'll
Okay, is
second.
there a second?
I'll second.
Great, so that was a motion to approve by Commissioner Kudo and a second by Barbara Kylie Miller. Great, any discussion? Commissioner Miller.
Just two tiny things. On page 3 of the minutes, the third paragraph, second sentence that starts Attorney Bayer stated, there's just one little word correction where it said it is his recommendation to verify there. The OR should be replaced with ARE. No further comments. And then at the bottom of that page, maybe this is a question for Barb, just to make sure I understand the section of the minutes. We were talking about the rear setback of that apartment building as it abutted the alley and the adjacent residential property. So that term residential property, so does that mean where the actual house is? There's a certain setback versus, like, say, where their front yard is, the eastern half of that building that has a smaller setback than
Sure, I'd have
the
to
yard
look that up.
front is for the house. Yeah. I was just a little confused with that, and I thought, well, for future reference, that would be good to know.
Can you still hear me? Yeah, I'd have to look up
Yeah.
specifically what's in the minutes, but the discrepancy with the lot line when it abuts an alley is that is not abutting a residential lot, it's abutting an alley, which is public right of way. So with respect to the proposed redevelopment, it abuts a residential property at the very western edge of the property, where
Okay.
it does actually directly abut the residential lot off of Prospect, I believe. But the Stowell house that is just behind the development is actually separated by public right of way, so it doesn't directly abut a residential alley. So I don't know if that answers your question with respect to the minutes or not.
Yeah, it did, because I probably could have done one of those, satellite view things to figure out. I just didn't understand that part. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just to be clear, you're not asking for any change?
Okay.
Commissioner Miller? Oh, sorry.
No, I'm not.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying. All right, any other discussion regarding the minutes? Okay, I will just say, Crystal, you do a fantastic job. You capture a lot of information there.
Thank you.
All right, so seeing no further discussion, why don't we take a vote on the minutes as presented with the one minor change that Commissioner Kylie Miller suggested. All those in favor say aye or show of hands.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. I am, for some reason, I can't get out of speaker view. I don't know what that's about today, but, so I can't really see anyone. So can we do a roll call vote, please?
Sure. President McCaig,
Yes.
Trustee Bockhorst, Not sure if she stepped away.
She's still on mute.
Okay. Therese Klein.
I think we're all having difficulties with Zoom here. Yeah.
Okay, I see you. Eric Kudo.
Yes.
And is that everyone I'm missing?
Trustee Bachhorst?
Oh, Barbara Kylie Miller. Jesus, sorry.
Yes, yes.
Saw your hand before. Okay.
Okay. So you can 4 in favor and 1 no vote, or like abstain.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is item 3, discussion of proposed amendments clarifying the site restriction regulations related to green space requirements contained within Article 3, general provisions of Chapter 535, zoning of the Shorewood Village Code. So we'll hand it over to Bart for an overview, then we'll take public comment, and then we will, oh, this is discussion only, so we won't be offering a recommendation at this time, right?
Correct. Can you still hear me? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I'll just give a brief overview. Like you mentioned, President McKay, this is just for discussion, not for recommendation. And so with respect to zoning administration, it is my role as the village planning zoning administrator to perform commercial zoning reviews when responded to. Earlier this year, I did respond to one in which I did not indicate any sort of lot coverage ratio requirements because as a matter of form, the village has not administered lot coverage ratios for commercial properties. Within the packet, I've given you the history of where this is all coming from. So in 1986, the village added to our ordinance more specifications with respect to driveways, patios, and garages that required 30% green space. Staff has always, even prior to me, administered that with respect only to residential properties, not to commercial properties. And so when I issued the zoning review earlier this year, I did the same. Last month, I had received an appeal from the neighbors regarding the proposed development at 2420 East Capitol Drive, which noted that that requirement was not included. But as I'm suggesting, and as I've provided history in the past, none of the commercial properties in Shorewood have been held to that standard. And so in order to clarify the code, both for applicants and for neighborhood and other residents, staff is looking for a discussion as to whether or not we can amend this particular section to relate it specifically to residential properties and to put it within the section specific to driveways, patios, and porches. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, but once again, this is just for discussion tonight.
Okay. So yeah, I think originally it was agendized for consideration with a recommendation requested, and then it was changed to discussion. So that item C is, we can disregard for this evening. So we can take questions and then of course hear from anyone. If members of the public would like to be heard this evening, we can take that comment as well.
I could just clarify with that. So yes, we did originally publish this for consideration of a recommendation, but the code specifically does say that a recommendation cannot be offered until the meeting after it's been discussed or introduced. And so we simply can't give a recommendation tonight. So that would be at either next meeting or a forthcoming meeting as the Plan Commission directs.
Okay. Thank you. So any comments or discussion at this time? Commissioner Kylie Miller?
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. Maybe Bart can answer these for me. That chart that shows lot coverage, with the 10% for accessory structure, does that refer to, having a garage or greenhouse or guest house or kind of like any other accessory structure or plural structures, that can only take up 10%?
Yes, it primarily relates to garages, correct? But yes,
To garages.
Garden sheds, things of that nature do also go towards that total, but it's primarily garages.
Okay, because I know that in the past, talking about, housing options, Commissioner Klein had brought up an interest in accessory dwelling units. And so we don't, I think, have any kind of ordinance for that yet. That probably would not pertain to this accessory structure right now.
Correct. Those are typically developed either above the garage or within the garage. They're not usually in addition to. And so
Okay.
at this time, I don't think that there's any relevance to that future expectation.
Okay, and then when we, in the front yard, or when we talk about, percentages, does that exclude like the public right of way, like in the front yard, whether that's 4 feet back from the sidewalk or whatever, that's just, from wherever your lot actually starts?
Correct. It's the private property, correct. So a survey is required to be submitted for those reviews. And on that survey, it only deals with the private property. And then it excludes those areas pertaining to accessory structures, primary structures, driveways, patios, et cetera.
Okay. And then kind of lastly, so, we talk about commercial buildings, but then there are those, how do we think about those buildings on our commercial streets that are just all residential, whether they're older or newer, apartment buildings? What kind of category? They're kind of, got a foot in both camps.
It
They're
relates to
residential, but they're,
It
they're
relates
really,
to the zoning of the property. So those properties on Capitol and Oakland are zoned commercially. And so it's relating to the zoning of the property, not necessarily the structure that it's built on it.
okay. And then do we have, I know that maybe a few years ago, the Conservation Committee came out with some guidelines for the village on development. Do we have, how do those kind of work in here? Like, do they have any recommendations on green space or, things that we should think about for the future that we want to incorporate? Or that's my
Yeah,
last question.
Sure. With respect to the discussion at hand, this is not intending to change anything. As I mentioned, we already do administer this on residential properties. However, we have not ever done it on commercial properties.
Okay.
It's my belief that when this was adopted in 1986, it was perhaps just adopted in the wrong place. There was no large discussion of wholesale change in the commercial district. Once again, those properties are primarily all commercial building or all parking lot. So they have not ever had 30% green space applied to them. So what is being discussed here really is just a matter of cleaning up the code.
Okay, so this, we've got all the different zoning districts, most, like half are all residential. And then we've got the commercial use. So for the commercial use, there's no lot coverage restrictions. And so the coverage restrictions we have are really just for those residential zones.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Bart.
Thank you. Any other commission members? Okay, any members of the public who would like to be heard? All right, thank you. Yeah, this
So,
seems
yep,
pretty straightforward to me.
President McKeag, I believe Carol, which I believe might be Carol Walsh or Dan Walsh, did raise their hand of some sort, I believe.
Oh, okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Carol,
Yeah, it's
you can state
Dan.
your name and address.
Yep,
Oh,
it's
okay.
Dan Walsh, 4024 North Stowell Avenue.
Mhm.
Bart, I just found out about this today, and so obviously nobody else in the village knows about it except for commission members and staff. So, again, we're having the same sort of conversations again about things that are long-term impacts of the village.
Excuse me, Mr. Walsh. Mr. Walsh, could you please
Yes.
direct your comments to the chair, please? You can direct your comments to me.
Okay, President McKeag, I'd be happy to. Again, there is nobody, we are the only member of the public on this. There is virtually no notice to any members of the public about any part of this. So what I wanted to see is is there an evaluation of all the commercial properties in the village indicating that all of them have less than 30% green space? Everything that we've ever done since 1986 has less than 30% green space. And so, could it be that when they passed this, they could have said that it doesn't apply to commercial properties? Is that possible that they could have said that?
And that it wasn't captured in the minutes
Well,
or the language?
right, they could have said this only applies to commercial properties. They could have said that. Am I right? They did not say that.
Right.
Okay, I don't wish to argue with you on any of this, but we have multiple comprehensive plans, multiple Main Street plans, conservation reports, all saying, hey, we want to increase the amount of green space in new development. We have lots of complaining about the development on Oakland Avenue because it doesn't have enough green space. It appears too big. It's mostly concrete. The neighbors were badly affected by these properties. We've provided reams of data on all these things. All we've ever said was, let's create a code that provides some green space for the commercial development. And what you're saying is, no, we don't apply our code. We apply it however we want to apply it. It's not clear from the code at all that it's only commercial. It doesn't say that anywhere in the code. Just because you've been applying it that way doesn't mean that that's where the code reads. And then finally, the intention of the code is not clear from anything that I've seen. There might be more materials, but we haven't seen any of those materials. So we have comprehensive plans, Main Street plans for 30 years saying, hey, we want more green space. We have a code that actually provides for that green space. And now we're going to change the zoning code so that the things that the residents want are going to be ignored. Am I wrong? Am I wrong here?
We're just gonna, that's a
Take our
rhetorical question. We're gonna take it as comments.
Right. Okay, so I think it's impossible for you to say that in 1986, because they could have very easily put it in the code that it didn't apply to commercial properties. There are multiple commercial properties that have more than that have 30% green space in close proximity to this particular development in this case. And the community is asking for more green space. For you to come to this meeting and say, hey, let's get rid of this because we don't want it in our commercial properties, I think that's disingenuous and you're doing damage to the community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other members of the public who would like to be heard? Commissioner Kudo?
Can I, just as a matter of clarification, has there been a request from the public? I mean, of all the zoning things to take up, the things that we've been talking about, I guess this question is for Bart or for President McKay. Why this one? Why now? You know, has anyone come forth and said, we would like to get rid of this because we don't want to have more green space in the village? It just seems to kind of be coming up out of nowhere. And it's only one item. So I'm just wondering, you know, what the push is.
I'd actually be happy to answer that, President McKay, if you'd allow me to.
Sure.
Yeah, so this has been known my entire time here, and in speaking with Justin Burris, it's been known for his entire 9 years here as well. The reason it's coming before you is because we received a specific appeal that we're not administering it. In order to clarify why we're not administering it, I would like the Plan Commission to have this discussion. If the Plan Commission and Village Board wants to apply 30% green space to commercial properties, I would need that specific direction because I have no history or precedent of that being applied to any former or current redevelopment. So I'm here looking for clarification from the elected officials and the appointed officials as to how to administer the zoning code. It is my interpretation that the history of this is tied specifically to driveways, patios, porches on residential properties. I provided the ordinance and the minutes of which it was discussed, and there were no wholesale changes discussed with respect to adding green space to commercial properties. So the reason it's coming before you for discussion is for clarity within my job and for both the Plan Commission and Village Board to understand how that's being administered.
Yeah, I mean, Bart, I don't think this is. I totally get where you're coming from, and I know we've talked about this in the past, and this is part of the sort of upkeep or maintenance. It just seems kind of odd to me that this is the one thing that's popped up, especially when I have not heard, and I'm sure maybe Therese or the other other commissioners have heard requests from the public to take this off the books, to make this not a part of our code anymore. But it does strike me as sort of odd that we get sort of the opposite request: more green space, more opportunities. If people fighting to get closer to that 30%. I know it was discussed for the Capitol and Stoll project. I know it was discussed for the Lake Bluff and Oakland project. What I haven't heard is anyone saying, no, we should get rid of it. So I guess I'm wondering why, even though it's been on the books and it hasn't been enforced. And I know that's not you, Bart, and I totally understand that, but clearly it was put on the books for a reason. I'd like to assume that, sort of the predecessors to the current board knew what they were doing when they put it there. So I'm just wondering why one, we weren't enforcing it, and two, even though the community has put forth plan after plan after plan, and we've put, the Parks Commission, all of that stuff, everyone says that they want more green space, why we're going backwards on that right now. And if it just has to do with the appeal, then okay, but I just haven't heard any push from anyone in the community saying we want less green space. Maybe someone else has. If you have, I would love to hear it.
I don't, but Director Friedman-Trog, is there anything you want to add at this time?
No, I will add the Board of Appeals probably will hear this appeal before your next discussion. So if they are fine confirming how we've administered the code, there is no need to change the code. I'm just bringing this before you because it's been a known error. Trust me, there are other errors in this code that I would love to clean up, and we're going to do that hopefully at least with commercial property through the zoning update. But it's just part of my job that when I find errors in the code that I need to address, that I bring it to you. So it is coming as a request from me. I'm honest with that. And if the Plan Commission recommends different or the board recommends different, then I will follow suit.
I guess my question is it an error in the code, or was it purposely written into the code and we just, and your predecessors and everyone else, just haven't enforced it, right? Do we know that it's an error?
I mean, I've given you all the history that I have on it, and nothing says that it relates to changing the commercial look of the village. And so it was done with respect to neighborhoods in mind, as the whereas clause notes. And so that's my interpretation. The materials that I have, I've shared with you. Feel free to look, and if you feel differently, like I said, I'm happy to have that conversation. But this is just a discussion as to what I think the code needs to be cleaned up so that it matches administration.
No, I appreciate. I mean, I appreciate the documents. I thought they were helpful. So thank you. Thank you for your answer.
So I believe I saw Commissioner Kylie Miller's hand, and then I saw Trustee Bachhorst's hand.
Yeah. Looking at the redlined section on page 24 of our packet, it's pretty easy to see that what we're replacing, referred to each lot. And now we're kind of clarifying that this is for residentially zoned lots over. So fine, this is just for residential lots. That I think makes it very clear. So maybe what we need to do in the future is have a separate discussion about what, if any, requirements we would want to beyond, green space and shrubs and that kind of thing. That's why I asked about the Conservation Committee's recommendations, because there's lots of things in the village that are not applied the same. We have an initiative to like disconnect downspouts from houses where it's possible. So we're not putting more water, surface water into the sewers, but yet we don't seem to hold commercial developers to, trying to eliminate that kind of water runoff, either from, by requiring them to have permeable parking lots and that kind of thing. So there's definitely a difference in how we apply codes to different kinds of buildings. And so I do understand that this is only to clarify that these requirements are for residential properties. And then maybe if we want to have different requirements or clarify what commercial properties should have, that would be a separate discussion for the future. Is that the right way of thinking about it? That this is just what we've got right now is just for residential zoned lots. And so anything else is a separate issue.
Correct. It's my goal to clarify how it's currently being administered. And if the Plan Commission Village Board wants to modify those requirements for the commercial properties, we're in the commercial zoning update process right now, so that discussion can take place. And the Conservation Committee is on the working group for that matter.
Yeah, I appreciate Commissioner Kylie Miller referencing those recommendations from the Conservation Committee, because we should definitely give those to the consultant on the zoning code update to make sure that they're referenced and considered if they haven't already been integrated. I don't remember whether they were adopted or not. Trustee Bockhorst, did you have something you wanted to say?
Oh, no, I'm good. Just appreciate us cleaning up the code. Thank you.
All right, anyone else? Commissioner Klein, you don't have to speak, but if you want to, okay.
Kate
All
Flynn
right.
Post has her hand raised,
Oh, yes.
if you're willing to take that.
Ms. Flynn Post. Yes.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners. I'm a member of the Commercial Zoning Working Group. And one of the first things that I did in reviewing the zoning code, one of the first things that I noticed was this issue. So I would say that I am a member of the public that wants to see this cleaned up, and looking forward to more changes and modifications to the zoning code. This was the first thing that stood out to me.
That's helpful, thank you. All right, anyone else who would like to be heard? Yes?
I'm not seeing anyone else with their hand.
Okay. Okay. All right, then we'll close this item for this evening, and we will come back to it at a future date as the ordinance instructs. And at that time, it would be a public hearing. All right, the next item is an update on the commercial zoning code update project. And that memo is in our, so this is the purpose of, it's an interim memo, and there are no conclusions to draw at this stage. It basically gives a baseline of uses and building forms that have been observed by the consultant as a starting place. So what would be helpful?
I cut out for a little bit there. If they need anything further, let me know. Sorry.
I'm sorry, what was that, Director Griepenthal?
I just cut out for the last probably 2 minutes. So are we on to the next item? Is that correct?
We are. I just opened it up. So what would be helpful? What were you hoping for from the commission this evening, Director Kriepentrag, in response to this interim memo?
Yeah, this really was for informational purposes only. It was in the scope that when she had completed, the consultant had completed the task 1 findings, that she would present a memo to the Plan Commission. Ideally, she would be here in person, but we actually asked her to come in for 2 kickoff meetings instead. So she's using that within her contract. And quite honestly, this is kind of just like a reference document that will be used throughout. So what this primarily relates to is her scan of the district, and she identified within the 4 segments that she's identified the primary building types and forms that are there. And so that will help guide her regulations and code updates as she moves forward. So if there's anything in any of those 4 districts that she identified that you think is missing or perhaps questionable, feel free to provide me with an email, or we can discuss it now. But it really was just informational purposes of where she's landed at this point. She's also has 3 more stakeholder listening sessions to complete next week. But beyond that, then we would be moving into stage 2, which is the public workshop starting next March 31st. So we're just kind of trying to wrap all those task 1 findings up together at the same time. And this was in the scope that she would provide to this plan commission for your reference.
And I would imagine that this memo would be the basis of the workshop next week in terms of educating the public on use and building form, so that they kind of understand what code applies and what code doesn't.
Correct.
Okay. I thought I saw one really super minor thing in here, and so I will look for it and I'll email you. But it was super minor. Any other discussion or comments? Commissioner Kylie Miller?
Thanks. I thought this was really interesting, especially looking at those buildings on Capitol west of Oakland that, I tend to drive by. You don't really notice a lot of those. So I thought that was really interesting. And gosh, I feel sorry for the employees who work in that AT&T building without any windows. So I guess my question to Bart is, if we've got anything that we want to bring to the consultant's attention, is it best just to email you about that?
Correct. Email me directly and I can forward it along.
Okay. And then the only other thing, that whole B2 versus B3, B2 is the one that has, can have apartments like all floors. So I really hope we keep that as a zone, because like, say if those buildings were going to get redeveloped and, mixed use is proposed for that, retail or whatever for that first floor, then we're going to lose some apartments, that might be good for affordable housing, or just in general, lose housing units. So, I hope we keep that zoning thing. But otherwise, there were just a couple of little tiny things that were just errors, in the way the descriptions or whatever, but I will email those to you. Thanks.
Any other comments? Clarifications? Great. Yeah, it jumped out to me that we have 4 gas stations in town, and we used to have 2 car dealerships, which we don't have anymore. And it will just be interesting to see gas stations in 10, 20 years, if those sites would be redeveloped or anything. But I'll save that for the zoning code discussion parts. But I appreciated the layout of the memo, and I'm really looking forward to this process. All right, thank you for bringing that forward. And I believe it brings us to future items. Oh no, update on return to in-person plan commission meetings. Director Griepentrag, you included a memo that was pretty clear.
So last night, the village board, and perhaps President McKeag, you can weigh in with a little more information as well. They did revoke the emergency order. And so with that being off the books, it is not possible for us to continue to justify exclusively virtual meetings. And so the village board will be starting to test run a hybrid format. While they run that hybrid format, all other committees will be asked to go back to in-person meetings. So Assuming that we have a meeting in April, we will be back to in-person, unless for some reason on April 4th, the board switches course on that. But it is my expectation that for the next couple months, we will be exclusively in person. There is a desire, I believe, for hybrid meetings to be the format of future Plan Commission meetings, but the village board is going to test run that process first.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks for that clarification. And I think we will still be recording Plan Commission meetings, right? And then if the idea is that people be in person if they can be, but certainly if something takes you out of town or you have a medical or physical issue that you can't come in and you want to call in to participate, that option will still be available. It's not the expectation that if you're on vacation, you call in, but until we have hybrid available, if you do need to call in order to participate, it's by discretion of the chair. So just contact me and we'll work something out. So I don't think we'll have too many questions, but, and it's not assigned seating, so you guys can sit wherever you want, I believe, when you get to the courtroom. That was a big discussion last night at Village Board, who gets to sit where. So, okay, any questions about returning to in-person? All right, we'll look forward to seeing you there. That brings us to future items, agenda items. Director Griepentrag, are you aware of anything?
I'm sorry, can you ask again?
Oh, are you aware of any future agenda items other than the code restriction update?
We may have one conditional use permit for an event center on Capitol Drive within the lower level of the Remax building on Capitol and Wilson. Still waiting on some additional information on that, but that space is currently vacant. They're looking to have it as meeting space during the day and conference event space at night and the weekends. Still waiting on a few more details on that, but that would be scheduled as a conditional use review in April. Beyond that, there's probably some updates that we can give with the commercial zoning project. So I do expect to have a meeting, whether it's for consideration. I don't have that defined quite yet.
Okay, great, thank you. Are there any future agenda items that the commissioners have questions about or are aware of? Okay, this isn't a future agenda item, but I will say that Commissioner Kylie Miller and I got together for tea today, and it was a really great, I really appreciated the conversation and am looking forward to, and it's taken me a while, but I am trying to reach out and meet with people that are on various commissions and committees and visit ones that I'm not on, and et cetera. So if anybody on the commission would like to get together and, just talk village and plan commission, I am, eager to do that and would welcome that opportunity. We didn't talk about anything that's going to come before the plan commission. So, okay. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay. Motion to adjourn by Trustee Bachhorst, seconded by Commissioner Kudo. All those in favor, say aye. Show of hands.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, anyone opposed? I think we are adjourned at 7:09.
Right,
All right,
all for
thank
your
you,
patience tonight.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye safe, Bart.
Safe
Have a
travel.
safe trip, Bart.
All right, see y'all.
Okay, good night,
Bye.
everyone.